Okay, back to inclusiveness. A few of you have mentioned it here before. Now, if think tanks and researchers can see it, but you say it's missing from the NEM, do we have the opportunity to put it into the NEM? Are the doors to the policy still open?
There is one very interesting proposal in the NEM that I thought is worthy of us looking into further and trying to push for its implementation. And there's a proposal to establish an Equal Opportunities Commission, which is, I think, one of the most interesting proposals that the NEM has put forward. The Equal Opportunities Commission could look at not only creating opportunities for people in particular races, but also from a gender perspective, and also from the perspective of the people who are disabled, disadvantaged groups as well. So that is one very specific recommendation that needs to be looked at. The other proposal that the NEM had was to have an independent review every 2 years. An independent review will look at how it's been implemented, weaknesses, challenges that needs to be addressed. We are now 2 years after the implementation of the NEM, and we've not had that independent review. Perhaps we should be looking into how we can then get the government to institute an independent review of its progress.
Is there anything in writing as to who?
Yeah, but it's all in the NEM.
No, who does the review?
It's an independent panel that's supposed to be appointed.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
On the issue of the NEM, when we talk about inclusiveness, a core concept is access. Who gets access to the concessions created by the state? Now that is the big debate. If we have policies which target people according to their needs and rather than to their ethnicity, that makes a whole lot of difference, because the fact remains that new inequalities emerged following the implementation of affirmative action. We can see in terms of a spatial divide. The poorest states in the country today are, interestingly enough, Bumiputra dominated states. Sabah, the poorest state, Sarawak, Kedah, Perlis, Terengganu. What is also interesting here is these states are also states with oil. That raises the question, there's something fundamentally wrong here in terms of inequities that have emerged in these states. How do you explain this? So here we are seeing capture of concessions created by the state by a group that does not necessarily need this kind of help. And that is what's causing income and wealth disparities that we are seeing emerging in this country today. So these are the issues which I think the NEM is also trying to address. They talk about the bottom 40%, which I think is interesting, because I think the time has come for us to transcend discussions based on race. Society is clearly saying, even during the elections, it's very clear, they want us to move beyond discussing topics from a race-based perspective to a perspective that is based on what is really required for change to bring about real inclusiveness in this country.
If I may just
Sure.
follow on to that, we must understand that affirmative action came about because of ethnicity. People became poor because of socio-cultural reasons. In the 70s, we had Chinese who were rubber tappers in the Sime Darbis and the United Plantations, and Indians and Malays. Within one generation, Chinese are able to work themselves out of the rubber estate and move on to urban centers and move on to other things in life. The Indians and the Malays still stay there. So they were poor because of socio-cultural factors. So there is a need to help people based on need, based on their economic status, but there is also a need to help people because of their ethnicity, because socio-culturally that's what they were. You talk about the Punjabis and the Sikhs. They have in their culture, they can't beg, they have to work. So in one generation, a Sikh, a Punjabi family makes giant strides, in Malaysia with basic infrastructure, schools, facilities, so on. They can move on. There are other communities who don't, the Dayaks, the Kadazans in Sabah, they're still there. So there are socio-cultural factors involved. So you cannot deny that. But looking forward, I also we have to really start looking at the post-NEP dialogue. We have to start looking into that. If I may suggest, we also have to look at graduation, to graduate. If certain sectors have matured, if there are enough Bumiputras who are capable in a particular sector, then free it up. If the financial sector now is fairly mature in Malaysia. It need not be so controlled anymore. Maybe we can free up these sectors away from this affirmative action. What Tan Sri said just now, you can have this monitoring of how things are developing. So we can't just have this this spoon feeding and subsidy thing for all sectors permanently, because as I said, this thing was crafted 40 over years ago. If certain things have matured now, we free it up. The auto industry, I feel, is one of them. You can really free it up into the market now. It need not have so many controls. So I think maybe this is one way we can look at it, where we graduate sectors of the economy, and instead of saying 20 years, 30 years for the entire thing, maybe certain time frames for this industry, that sector, and then we focus it so that there are clear targets, and instead of just endless NEP with no end in sight, focus it and then formulate micro policies to make sure it happens.
Do you think
if we were to go on a needs-based approach, which is one of the main proponent ideas in the NEM, then the needy of all ethnic groups will be taken into account, will be addressed.
That's it. I feel that you see, from my own personal observation if you take ethnic groups, Malays let's talk about them if a Malay guy, his father is wealthy, rich in a kampong, it doesn't mean the son is going to be successful, despite there are other things involved. There are religious factors involved. Secupak rezeki secupak takkan jadi segantang mentality is there. Whereas the Ceylon Tamils, they don't need any help. Okay, I don't know if you're Ceylon Tamil or not. They move forward. The Sikhs, the Chinese, the cultural aggressiveness is there. So you need
but
to
the poor of this group used to be
you can see that the poor graduate at different rates. Now, poor of the Malays and
in sociology, they call this a very essentialist argument, that certain ethnic communities under any circumstances are always going to be
it's not a racial thing, it's not a DNA
it's
thing.
a racialization
it's
of
a socio-cultural thing. It takes time.
It's like what they said about the blacks in America.
That's right.
I can see our Malay representative here is dying to jump in. Oh, you are?
Yes, I am. I think the cultural factor is rather a myth. There's a study done to see the motivations of
It's a myth.
student, I think by So Poling from Penn State. He studies the motivation of Malay student against other. They have the same motivation students as others.
Right.
Savings habit, almost the same. Consumption habit, almost the same. There's not much on cultural factor. Myth of lazy native, say Hussein and others argue about this. I want to comment on NEM focusing on bottom 40%. It's not enough to focus on bottom 40%. You must also address the top. Now you look at the wages structure, the income structure. Most of the income goes to the top, the corporates. Wages 28%. Of the total income, only 28% go to wages. You look at America, it's double the amount. We pay our workers too little. Those that earn at the top, they earn from capital gain. We don't tax them. I work, I pay tax. They don't pay tax. I hold long-term shares, I pay dividend, I pay tax. They sell shares, buy and sell, they don't pay tax. This has to be addressed. The whole distribution you have to address, not only bottom 40%.
Not too Marxist.
Not too Marxist, no. This, even America has this. They charge 15% on capital gain. There's a few. The point is you have to look at the whole distribution, not only bottom 40%. The third point is that to move forward, is need-based is the solution? I would say no. Need-based does not replace race-based. It complements. I'll give you an example. Now, like Tan Sri said, I agree. Need-based would solve poverty. Everybody covered. But now, if you want to make sure those in Sabah and Sarawak underrepresented in employment in certain sectors, how do you do? Are you going to employ based on the income of the parents? No. You have no choice but to use race-based. It doesn't have to be race-based. It will be non-need-based. Another example, the government introduced suggest women 30% in board member. Is that a need-based? It's not. It's a gender-based. If there's a need, because there's a limitation in education, in labour market, you have no choice but to address this, because there is still in Malaysia, no level playing field.
You're not going to object to that.
But this we have to address. There's items that we can do away with race-based, but there are items that you still need race-based.
Well, I agree. As Syed said, I'm not going to object to the 30% thing, but I think it's you could argue it's a need thing, because why haven't they been there? I think that's what women's groups are arguing. when they, the other word is
Exactly. But
to be
the woman,
inclusive.
it doesn't only get the poor woman. Woman has that
Yeah.
opportunities.
Yeah.
Then how do you tweak the policy and the instruments? But we have to realize that being only focusing on need-based would not solve the problem. If later the problem is the Indians that you want to solve, are you going to use just need-based because they're underrepresented in CEO position, professional? You have no choice but to focus also on non-need-based. It complements.
But would we be looking at filling up CEO positions with,
No, I mean,
with
not only on
Indians?
poverty,
No.
there's
Yeah,
others.
I think we have to lift everyone up of
Exactly.
poverty
That's-
and then work from
Exactly.
there.
There's items that
Right.
you can use race, there's items that you can need. Race or special or disability, whatever. But focusing on need-based only would not solve the problem.
Okay, and here now we stop for another break.